Climate change has brought Morocco vulnerabilities. The first one is the decreased rainfall. Morocco is currently experiencing a severe drought due to the decreased amount of rainfall. Morocco received 42.7% less rain than in an average year in 2016. The exposure is the Mediterranean, the coast, and the mountain areas used for farming. The ecological sensitivity is agriculture will be impacted by the decreased rainfall. Farmers in Morocco will be unable to grow common crops such as wheat. The economical sensitivity is grain production has decreased by 70% due to the drought, causing a shortage in food. Prices of crops will increase due to the shortage, and many farmers will lose their jobs in rural regions. The social sensitivity is due to the drought. It will be difficult, but not only farmers, but also people in the communities of Morocco to find clean water. The second one is sea level rise. With the 2-meter sea level rise due to the climate change, some parts of the coast where the natural coastal defenses have been destroyed. The exposure is sea level rise resulted in increasing flooding, which affected many coastal hotels and industry. The coast in many locations is physically and socio-economically vulnerable to accelerated sea level rise, such as the Tangier Bay. The sensitivity of this is it directly causes perishing economics and ecosystem in Morocco. A mix of hard and soft protection measures could help overcome sea level rise and related problems, but care needs to be taken as hard defenses could lead to unexpected and unwanted adverse impacts. The third one is difficulties to find clean water. Climate change caused salinization of aquifer in the northeastern plain of Morocco. The groundwater can only be used for irrigation since the high salinity, and the rivers are not clear as before because they are rich precipitation. The sensitivity is in rural communities. Women need to travel further to get clean water. In addition, because most of them are poorly educated, they have no voice in the community. It is hard for these women to adapt to the situation. The fourth one is increased storm surge to the coast. Climate change will most likely increase the amount of rainfall that low-lying coastal areas are likely to see. The exposure is much of Morocco's services and population resides within 10 to 20 miles of the coast, making them very susceptible to floods from storm surge or other natural disasters. These areas would be devastated by a sudden large influx of storms to the area. As these low-lying areas get hit by such weather, the exportation capitals will be shut down and possibly damaged in the process. Coastal flooding will set back the large portion of the Moroccan economy that comes from the service sector. The last vulnerability is threat to biodiversity. Anthropogenic climate change is threatening biodiversity in Morocco due to harsh climate. There are 4,500 plant species, and 1,000 are at risk of becoming extinct. The social change in increasing human population and economical change of urbanization and pollution are a few of the main threats leading to ecological change. The loss of plant species will impact the natural habitats of many animals, making it much more difficult for those animals to find food and shelter. However, climate change also brings some opportunities. The first one is decreasing malaria risk. Western parts of Morocco are to experience a decline in annual rainfall, as well as a 3 to 5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature due to climate change. The exposure is this ecological change will dramatically decrease the wet season of Morocco and channels. Marshes and puddles will be dried up and disappear. The prospect of this is mosquitoes have a very narrow breeding range that is borderline uninhabitable already. With an increasing temperature and decreasing standing water in the area, mosquitoes that may be carrying malaria will not be able to breed, causing a decrease in malaria-related deaths. This will result in both a cultural and economical change. The Moroccans will be able to raise their children without worrying about the malaria risk, so they can stop paying money for mosquito nets and other products to prevent mosquito and pool that money toward other necessary. Another opportunity is import renewable energy. The ecological changes the government has helped propel infrastructure investment by phasing out subsidies for fossil fuels and regulation in favor of green energy, which has encouraged private sector investment in renewables. The exposure is due to the long duration and high intensity of sunshine in Morocco. It becomes the best place for realize the sustainable development goals. The prospect is in 2016, Morocco opened Noor 1, a solar plant in the Sahara, and it will likely be the biggest solar plant in the world and provide energy for at least 1 million people with a 580 megawatt capacity in 2018.
Morocco's carbon footprint. Before the colonization and industrial revolution, pre-colonization Morocco consisted of many nomadic groups that lived in the desert and few groups along the coast, where there were more resources to acquire. Once European countries began to colonize Morocco, the coast began to be used as an export mega and grew exponentially in population. France drew resources from Morocco that was anywhere from the country's most abundant resource, phosphate, to human trafficking their citizens. Pre-industrial revolution survival techniques included fishing, farming land near the coast, and mining, which made Morocco's carbon footprint almost negligible. After the Industrial Revolution, global imperialism. Once Morocco won its independence from France, it began to thrive as a country. The country began to industrialize and work on large projects that encouraged immigrants from rural areas to move to the area to work in factories. These factories and projects required technology from more developed parts of the world that increased energy output by burning fossil fuels. Morocco's carbon footprint, like most other countries, greatly increased during this time period and has continued to put greenhouse gases in the air. History of fossil fuel burning. When under French rule, small companies in Morocco were allowed to use steam boilers and diesel engines to produce energy to distribute it. Without reliable sources for fossil fuels, Morocco was forced to move to hydroelectric power. This was limited due to the lack of sufficient water volumes, requiring Morocco to import more fossil fuels to keep up with the industrialization of the country. An oil crisis from a number of other crises raised the price of a barrel of oil from $13 to $34. Economical reforms such as privatization and deregulation of foreign trade allowed the economy to recover and regain its fossil fuel consumption. Morocco's overall emissions. Compared to the other countries, Morocco is rated sufficient on their overall emissions. This rating indicates that Morocco's climate plans are at the most ambitious end of its fair contribution, and it has increasing trend. History of deforestation and forest degradation. The forest cover is decreasing from 1990 to 2010. The annual change rate from 1990 to 2005 is negative, which represents deforestation. However, the annual change rate from 2005 to 2010 is positive, which means there is no deforestation at that period of time. Decreasing forest cover will result in a higher carbon footprint since trees can absorb carbon dioxide. Dominant lifestyles of different groups of citizens. Nomads is a group of population in Morocco. For these communities, droughts and rainfall fluctuations have threatened their traditional lifestyle. Sandstorm has become the most dangerous thing. Also, the nomadic families are facing the problem of resettling in cities or find another way for income. In some communities of coastal area, the average farm household is as little as 540 per year. These families need support from their overseas relatives to be out of poverty. Surveys indicate that local people are aware of climate change and link it to the rising temperatures, drought, torrential rains, and flooding the region has experienced in recent years. They worry about how climate change will affect farming, fishing, and tourism, and they expect it will directly affect their families over the next 30 years. Climate change's effect on the vulnerable population. Like other countries affected by climate change, the vulnerable populations that don't contribute much to the problem are the ones that are hit the hardest. A quarter of Morocco's population is either living in poverty or in constant risk of falling into poverty. The effects of climate change take a major toll on this area, causing droughts, crop shortages, and villagers to fill the desert cities to the brim. Women and children survive based solely on how well the man of the family provides for them. With resources becoming more scarce, the vulnerability of women and children is rising at an alarming rate. Morocco is one of 9 countries to adopt a plan to increase child health by making resources and services more available to the 66% of the population that have difficulty getting these resources in rural areas. This has already resulted in a 60% drop in the under 5 mortality rate. Future generations are gonna be the ones who bear the harshest burden of climate change, because today's children haven't waited around. They've headed to the oases of the coastline. Here are some trade-offs. Increase the amount of renewable energy. The good thing is it will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in the air, but the bad thing is the use of renewable energy will cause an economic problem in Morocco because it is very expensive. Have people move towards the coast of Morocco? The good thing is resources are more abundant along the coast, but the bad thing is it may cause overcrowding in Morocco. Indigenous people will also lose their method of survival. Treat the ocean to reduce the carbon content in the water. This will increase the ability for fish to breed and increase the ocean life population. But it could hurt other ecosystems that rely on the ocean, such as plants and algae. The replenishment of larger areas of forest. It will help conserve fragile ecosystems, but it will cost a lot and process slowly. Eat locally produced goods. It will have some positive effect on local economies, and it will use less fuel to transport goods. But it may hurt relationships with foreign trade, such as Spain, France, and India. Foreign delicacies won't be consumed.
For the history of Morocco's climate change platform, Morocco signed on to the UNFCCC on June 13, 1992 to cope with the impacts of climate change and limit the global temperature increase. After signing on, Morocco was not put into force until March 27, 1996. Morocco believes lowering greenhouse gas emissions will not only benefit their environment, but also their economy by introducing new clean technologies. From 2005 to 2010, Morocco devoted 64% of all climate-related spending in the country to adaptation. Morocco now focuses on both adaptation and mitigation. Morocco is only responsible for a small share of the problem of climate change, but believes it needs to be a commitment from all parties in regards to mitigation and adaptation. Instead of investing in adapting to climate change, Morocco invested in small-scale agriculture with the help of the World Bank. This assisted the livelihoods of the 52% of the population in the agriculture sector by raising income levels and living standards. For Morocco's actions to reduce climate change, the 45th session of the SBI and SBSTA met at COP22 to address the progression in technology to combat climate change. The second meeting of the first session of the APA seek to further guidance in mitigation, adaptation, and further matters of the implementation of the Paris Agreement. In 2001, the COP7 was held to discuss the Kyoto Protocol. The MCCC met in 2016 as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement so CMA1 could take place. Issues covered included governance, agriculture, and food security. COP22 and CM12 were held as conferences on November 17 and 18 of 2016. Morocco submitted the intended nationally determined contributions in advance of the new Universal Climate Change Agreement, which will be reached by the UN at the conference in Paris. These contributions include the estimation and accounting for anthropogenic GHGs as well as removals of such gases. NDCs from all parties were submitted for approval under the Paris Agreement. For the reasoning behind Morocco's climate change platform, the natural hazards caused by climate change resulted in economic recession and deeply hurt people's daily life. Before colonization and industrial revolution, Morocco relied on fishing, farming, and mining, which made negligible carbon footprint. However, after the Industrial Revolution, Morocco developed a lot of factories and it produced a lot of greenhouse gases. The Moroccan government needs to implement sustainable development plans in order to make its territory and civilization more resilient to climate change while ensuring a rapid transition to a low-carbon economy. Morocco is essentially an agriculture country, as the mining sector combined with the industrial sector reached barely 31% of the total GDP in 1955, 1 year before the independence of the country. The importance of the agriculture sector is still one of the characteristics of the Moroccan economy, as bad weather conditions often come with a slowing down of the economic growth of the country. Morocco is grappling with the serious effects of climate change after a significant drop in the country's economic growth in 2016 due to a severe drought in 2015. The program Plan Vert, or the Green Plan, that Morocco has launched will help local farmers adapt new and more environmentally friendly farming techniques.
Morocco's future. Moving forward, Morocco should plan on reducing climate change by 32% by 2030. Morocco should also preserve the valuable resource of groundwater, but still use enough to allow farmers to prosper. A valid option to switch over to a more renewable energy plan to reduce carbon emissions is recommended, such as a large solar panel field to harness the sun's powerful rays that beat down on the desert. Coastal areas and communities need to be protected as climate change brings more severe and frequent storms as well as rising sea levels. These coastal areas are a valuable asset that draw tourists in. Beaches should also be repaired to help encourage the tourism, and levee systems should be put in place to protect from storm surges and massive rainstorms. In addition, efforts to repair the degraded land so it can be farmed are to be pursued. Repairing the waterways and deacidifying the ocean to encourage the fishing industry to prosper will bring in income from taxes and fishing licenses as well as exports of fish that will greatly improve Morocco's economy. Vulnerable populations will be greatly benefited from the efforts to increase the amount of farmable land, as well as the efforts to find drinkable water. We also find it important to improve the healthcare facilities for the impoverished population and enhance the quality of education and healthcare for children. Morocco should assist indigenous people by allowing them to pull groundwater as well as giving them land to farm once it becomes farmable. Costs and benefits for future generations. A cost of preserving valuable groundwater would be the amount of groundwater is limited. Over the past 30 years, rainfall has become more erratic and has demonstrated an aggregate fall ranging between 3% and 30% in different regions. Farmers using groundwater to irrigate is a much easier process. A benefit of preserving valuable groundwater is the limitation of water as a resource will promote a more efficient way in irrigation. The World Bank Board of Executive approved a U.S. $150 million project to address efficient water use in agriculture, which is one of Morocco's core sectors as it generates 40% of their jobs nationwide. Renewable energy. Morocco is heavily dependent on imported fossil fuels. National decisions were taken to promote renewables in order to reduce the dependency. A benefit is that money could be saved by reducing the imports and use on investing in renewable energy. Renewable energy such as solar, wind, and water power will help to reduce the level of carbon emissions and Morocco's carbon footprint. Although investing in renewable energy will cost a lot, it will help to reduce Morocco's carbon emissions. Some benefits deacidifying the ocean and repairing the waterways would be the economy would boost in the future generations because of the exporting of fish in Morocco's fishing industry. It would also preserve the marine ecosystems, and repairing the waterways would not only increase tourism and the economy, but also the biodiversity of Morocco. It will take decades to see improvement, which is a cost, but it would require to stop CO2 emissions completely in the future, which can have a high cost. If we stop emissions, we would still have acidification from the atmosphere entering into our oceans for decades. Even though it would take time to see improvement, it is necessary because tourism and the fishing industry are huge contributors to Morocco's economy. The cost of repairing the waterways so that species can thrive is much more cost-effective than developing technology to help the fish breed. The capital gain from the fishing industry would pay for deacidification treatments, which is about $1 billion, within 30 to 40 years and boost the economy as a whole. Preparing land for farming. Agriculture, fishing, and the forestry sector employs about 44% of Morocco's workforce and depends heavily on rainfall. Some benefits of repairing the farmland is that more crops would be able to be grown and exported to boost the economy in the future and also for the citizens of Morocco. Job opportunities for future generations will be created in the agriculture industry. A cost of this is that repairing farmland may be difficult and expensive to do because of the decreased rainfall in the last few years, and also the rising sea level that is continuing to occur. The cost of repairing land may be expensive, but the overall benefit of increasing food availability and creating jobs will benefit Morocco's economy in the long term. Some vulnerable populations include the impoverished population in Morocco. Due to the limited number of healthcare facilities, the medical treatment for the impoverished people were extremely unreachable. Since 2005, they got help from the Moroccan government by providing a new system of medical care. The number of healthcare facilities has increased to over 26,000, and there are more than 20,000 doctors in Morocco. The government spent around 5% GDP on the healthcare sector, and new health insurance schemes were introduced to provide extra finance for medical provision. We recommend the government to improve not only the number of hospitals and doctors, but also the sanitation of the environment of healthcare facilities. Since we do have many healthcare facilities in Morocco, but they are in dirty areas, it results in a higher mortality rate, which is not what we want. Another vulnerable population are the children in Morocco. Some children in Morocco become the main income earners because adults cannot farm or find work or suffer from illnesses. Thus, they lack education and health care. Some charities and non-governmental organizations in Morocco are working on improving the availability of clean water in villages and shanty towns. It decreased the possibility of spreading some diseases such as cholera. We recommend the Moroccan government to provide more opportunities for children to go to school since education is a significant way to change their life. Another vulnerable population in Morocco are the fishermen. The fishing industry is struggling because of the limitation of fishing days as well as the changing of ocean conditions driving fish away from the coast of Africa. The rising temperature as well as the acidification of the ocean makes the shallow water near the coast uninhabitable for fish. Reoccurring storms drives fishermen inland and prevents them from making their living by fishing. The current government action in Morocco is the government is developing technology to assist the breeding of fish. We recommend that they focus on the ecosystem of the fish rather than the breeding process. Repairing the ecosystem will be much more effective in the assistance of fish breeding than helping them breed. Indigenous people are another vulnerable population in Morocco. The changing climate is having a negative effect on the nomadic lifestyles of the indigenous people. The indigenous people can't produce the amount of food for not only their livestock but for their families as well. Others have resorted to living in the city to get the resources that they need. The current government action in Morocco is the Indigenous Knowledge and Climate Change Conference in 2016 established a policy to bring the government and indigenous people closer together in communication of needs and ideas to adapt to climate change. Our recommended action is to improve the precautionary actions to keep the indigenous people from running out of food and water. This can be done by giving indigenous people a quota for the amount of water that they can use, as well as giving them some of the repaired land to farm. Indigenous people contribute very little to the carbon emissions of the country, so they should be at the top of the list for fair living conditions when the time comes.
I feel like I have been negatively affected by climate change. The droughts have made my land almost impossible to farm, and I can't provide for my family. I feel like we're all in the same boat. The grain production of our country has decreased as a whole and forced some of us to move to the coast where we must abandon our land and find ways to provide for our families. So the government has reached out to us farmers and provided a plan called the Moroccan Green Plan, which allows farmers technology and strategies to plant crops that require much less water. But without the proper irrigation technology to harness the groundwater, I still can't use my farmland.